Is the world standing on the edge of a new Cold War, or something even more dangerous? On August 1st, President Donald Trump ordered the deployment of 2 U.S. nuclear submarines into what the Pentagon calls appropriate regions. No location disclosed, no mission shared, no end date revealed. Just a chilling silence, backed by America's deadliest weapons. This wasn't a routine maneuver. It came hours after Dmitry Medvedev, the former Russian president and now a senior national security figure under Putin, issued a threatening, mocking message aimed directly at Trump. Medvedev brushed off Trump's now infamous 50-day Ukraine peace ultimatum and fired back, "This isn't Israel, it's Russia." Trump's countdown isn't for Ukraine, it's a threat to his own country. Those weren't just words. They were a direct challenge from a nuclear superpower, and Trump's response was swift, sharp, and full of strategic ambiguity. He addressed reporters briefly, saying, "Words are very important and can lead to unintended consequences." Let that sink in. No tweets, no threats, just submarines and silence. This marks a dramatic escalation in U.S.-Russia tensions, a shift from verbal sparring to military signaling. And it's not just about Russia. This move sends a message to China, to Iran, to NATO allies, and to the American public. Trump is ready to bring nuclear deterrence back into everyday geopolitics. In today's video, we're diving into the full story, slide by slide. First, we'll break down Trump's decision to deploy nuclear submarines, what we know so far, and what it means. Then we'll examine Medvedev's fiery statement, which many now see as a red line moment. We'll look into the strategy of nuclear ambiguity and why silence might be more terrifying than threats. We'll also analyze possible deployment zones, the appropriate regions the Pentagon won't name, and what those locations reveal about U.S. military thinking. Finally, we ask the big question: are we just one misstep away from a global crisis? This isn't just political theater. The stakes here are nuclear, and with other flashpoints, Ukraine, Taiwan, Iran, already heating up, we could be watching the start of Cold War 2.0 in real time. This is no ordinary military maneuver. On August 1st, President Trump made a decision that's already shaking capitals around the world. He ordered the immediate deployment of 2 U.S. nuclear submarines into what the Pentagon describes only as appropriate regions. Now, let's be clear, we don't know where they're headed. The U.S. Navy won't say, the White House won't say, but in geopolitics, silence speaks volumes. This kind of deployment, deliberately vague, unconfirmed, and untelegraphed, is what military strategists call strategic ambiguity. And that's exactly the point. The context? A direct and very public provocation from Dmitry Medvedev, Russia's former president, and now the deputy chair of the country's Security Council. Medvedev ridiculed Trump's 50-day peace ultimatum for Ukraine and fired back with a warning: "This isn't Israel, it's Russia." Trump's countdown is a threat to his own country. That statement went viral, and it was interpreted not just as an insult, but as a veiled threat, one that questioned Trump's judgment and even his safety. Trump's response? Not more threats, but movement. Submarines, armed, silent, deadly. In a short statement to reporters, Trump simply said, "Words are very important and can lead to unintended consequences." That one line is loaded. It suggests the administration is no longer playing the messaging game. It's moved into the deterrence phase. Bottom line, this wasn't a bluff, and it wasn't a leak. This was an intentional decision to show force without saying a word. That ambiguity is the signal. As we enter what some are now calling a Cold War 2.0, the question isn't just where these submarines are headed. It's what happens if the next move comes not in words, but in action. Let's talk about the moment that triggered the current crisis. Dmitry Medvedev's statement. It wasn't just a typical diplomatic jab. It was a direct public provocation. and it hit right at the heart of Trump's foreign policy credibility. Medvedev, once Russia's president, and now one of Putin's top security officials, responded to Trump's 50-day Ukraine ceasefire ultimatum with cold contempt. He didn't mince words. Here's what he said. Trump's 50-day countdown isn't for Ukraine. It's a threat to his own country. This isn't Israel. It's Russia. Let's unpack that. First, he mocks the countdown clock Trump used to pressure Ukraine and NATO allies into agreeing to terms. Then he draws a sharp line between regional influence, essentially telling Trump that Russia is not the Middle East. It's a nuclear power, a different game. More than that, the tone of the statement was taunting and calculated. Medvedev even warned Trump not to repeat the mistakes of Sleepy Joe, referring to President Biden, and claimed that pushing Russia could provoke irreversible outcomes. This is where it goes from insult to geostrategic messaging. The post didn't stay quiet. It went viral within hours, trending across Russian state media, Twitter, X, Telegram channels, and even mainstream U.S. outlets. Analysts immediately interpreted it as a thinly veiled nuclear threat, not to Ukraine, but to Trump personally and to the United States. For Trump, this was more than rhetoric. It crossed a line. The decision to deploy nuclear submarines soon after wasn't coincidental. It was a reply, not in kind, but in kind of weapon. Instead, Trump deployed ambiguity and force. But the fact that this entire standoff began with one viral statement tells us a lot about how fragile great power relations have become. It's not always the missile launch that starts the fire. Sometimes it's the meme. One of the most striking aspects of this escalation is what's not being said. Since the announcement of the nuclear submarine deployment, both the Department of Defense and the White House have maintained a careful and deliberate silence about the sub's locations, their specific mission, or even whether they are armed with nuclear weapons. This is classic strategic ambiguity in action. Strategic ambiguity is a powerful tool in nuclear diplomacy. By keeping opponents guessing, a country can maintain deterrence without triggering panic or forcing a direct response. It's a delicate balance between signaling strength and avoiding outright provocation. The U.S. is sending a message, but it's cloaked in secrecy. The Pentagon spokesperson simply confirmed the subs are deployed to appropriate regions without further detail. The White House press office echoed that this is part of a broader strategy to maintain strategic ambiguity. No timelines, no explicit mission objectives, no confirmations of nuclear armament. This lack of transparency fuels both deterrence and anxiety. This silence also serves a second purpose. It complicates Russia's and other adversaries' decision-making. If Moscow cannot be sure when or where the subs are, or if they carry nuclear weapons, it forces Russian military planners to act cautiously. This ambiguity can delay or deter any aggressive moves. However, this approach also carries risks. Ambiguity can lead to misunderstandings or miscalculations, especially in tense geopolitical climates like today's. If one side mistakes a strategic posture for an imminent threat, escalation can spiral quickly. That's the fine line the U.S. is walking. Moreover, the opacity raises questions for U.S. allies and domestic observers. Allies want reassurance and clarity, especially in times of heightened tension. Domestic critics worry about a lack of accountability and the risk of an unintended incident. The White House's tight-lipped stance may calm one side but raise alarms on another. In sum, strategic ambiguity is a double-edged sword, simultaneously a shield and a sword. It's an age-old Cold War tactic revived in a modern multipolar world where every word and every silence carries enormous weight. Though the Pentagon has kept the exact locations secret, analysts and military experts have speculated on the likely deployment zones for these nuclear submarines. Understanding where these subs might be headed reveals a lot about the strategic message Washington is sending. and the broader geopolitical chess game underway. Black Pawn, the top candidates for appropriate regions include the North Atlantic Ocean. This is a classic strategic hotspot, close to both NATO's European allies and Russia's Western maritime approaches. Deploying subs here signals readiness to counter Russian naval activity in the Arctic and North Atlantic corridors. It also reassures NATO allies of U.S. commitment. The Arctic Sea. The melting polar ice is opening new naval routes, and Russia has been aggressively expanding its military presence there. The Arctic is fast becoming a frontline for great power competition, making it a natural staging ground for strategic deterrence. The Pacific Theater, near Russia's eastern coast and close to China, this region is a growing flashpoint, especially with tensions over Taiwan and the South China Sea. Deploying subs here sends a message not only to Russia but also to Beijing, signaling U.S. resolve across multiple geopolitical fronts. The submarines likely involved are Ohio-class SSBNs, the backbone of America's sea-based nuclear deterrent. These vessels carry Trident-Sec D5 missiles capable of striking targets thousands of miles away with precision nuclear payloads. Their stealth and range make them nearly impossible to track, key to their deterrent effect. But the deployment isn't just about signaling Russia. It also communicates strength to China, Iran, and other geopolitical actors watching closely. The U.S. is reminding the world it's ready to respond decisively across multiple theaters, maintaining its military edge in an increasingly multipolar world. However, these moves also carry risks. Increased naval presence near contested waters raises chances of accidents or misinterpretation, any of which could trigger unintended escalation. The strategic message is clear, but so is the warning. The situation is fragile, and one wrong step could spiral out of control. In short, these submarines are not just weapons. They are floating symbols of power projection, deterrence, and geopolitical brinkmanship. Where they end up, and what signals they send, could shape global security for months, maybe years to come. As tensions escalate with nuclear submarines on the move and sharp words flying, a critical question looms. Are we truly just witnessing words, or are we dangerously close to a flashpoint that could spiral into real conflict? President Trump warned that words are very important and can lead to unintended consequences. That phrase underscores the gravity of the situation. When two nuclear powers engage in such provocative signaling, miscalculations are not just possible. They are probable. The Cold War was defined by a delicate balance of deterrence and diplomacy, backed by clear communication channels and mutual understanding of red lines. Today, that clarity is gone. The return of strategic ambiguity, while useful, also makes the geopolitical landscape more unpredictable. That unpredictability raises risks exponentially. The global markets are already showing signs of stress, reacting nervously to every headline. Allies express concern about the sudden escalation, while adversaries watch for weaknesses to exploit. The geopolitical fault lines around Ukraine, Taiwan, and Iran are simmering dangerously. One misinterpreted message or accidental encounter could ignite a broader crisis. In fact, some analysts warn that we're entering a phase where the risk of inadvertent conflict is higher than it's been in decades. Nuclear submarines operate in stealth and secrecy, ideal for deterrence, but a nightmare for communication. Imagine a scenario where one side mistakes a submarine's movement for a launch preparation. The margin for error is razor thin. Beyond military dynamics, there's also the political dimension. Domestic pressures, misinformation, and social media can escalate tensions faster than ever before. The fog of war now includes an information war that can inflame public opinion and constrain diplomatic options. So what does this mean for us? Vigilance and awareness are crucial. The world is watching a precarious dance, one where each side tries to show strength without crossing the line into actual conflict. Whether the current standoff de-escalates or worsens will depend on careful decisions in Washington, Moscow, and beyond. In the meantime, the return of Cold War-style signaling is a stark reminder. Even in 2025, nuclear weapons and great power rivalry remain an existential threat. The stakes couldn't be higher.